The desert stretched endlessly, scorched flat under a molten sun. The kind of place where time itself slowed down to a crawl and memories evaporated like heat off asphalt. Clint Eastwood's truck kicked up a dirty tail of dust as it rolled to a halt in front of a sun-bleached structure that barely resembled a business. The battered wood sign above the door read Maddox Guns and Gears, each letter half faded, the whole thing creaking slightly in the wind like an old throat trying to speak. Clint stepped out of the Ford, boots crunching over the gravel like someone pressing down on brittle bones, the only sound for miles save a single hawk circling above. The screen door let out a tortured squeal as he pushed it open, stepping into a long, narrow room that smelled of rust, oil, and dried tobacco. Rows of rifles lined the walls in custom wood racks, each one gleaming with a polish that didn't quite hide their years. Behind the counter stood a man built like a safe, broad-shouldered and bald with a beard that looked carved out of wire, polishing a Remington as if it were a prized possession. Clint's eyes passed over the wares with calculated disinterest until they found what they came for, a rare Winchester 1892, reportedly in working condition, with its name burned into a small brass tag beneath the glass case. "You Maddox?" Clint asked, voice dry and rough as a gravel road at midnight. "Ain't been him for years," the man replied, not looking up. "He died. I just run the place now." Clint nodded once, a movement so slight it could have passed for a twitch, then said, "I was told this place had a 92. Still holding it?" The man paused in his polishing, gave Clint a narrow look, then jerked his head toward the back wall. "Yup, in the case. Price ain't cheap." "Neither was the war," Clint said flatly, walking past the counter. As he approached the display case, he noticed a shadow first, a faint movement behind a door labeled Gear Closet, authorized staff only. It wasn't open, not quite, but it wasn't shut either. The sound that followed was so faint it almost wasn't there at all. A thump, then something like a muffled whimper. Instinct clicked into place like a well-oiled trigger. Clint Eastwood was old, but he wasn't slow. In a blink, he pivoted and stepped to the door, boot heel tapping the scuffed concrete just enough to announce himself. He opened it slowly, revolver drawn from the inside of his coat with a motion that was neither rushed nor uncertain. The smell was the first thing that hit him. Blood and rot, thick and metallic, coiled in the air like a snake ready to strike. The light inside the closet was dim, filtering through slats in a high window, just enough to reveal the outline of hunting gear, spare scopes, boxes of ammo, and a woman, crumpled on the floor, tied at the wrists and ankles, dried blood streaking her temple and pooling beneath her hip. She was alive barely. Her eyelids fluttered weakly, then opened wide with panic as she registered Clint's looming shape. "Easy," he said, crouching beside her. "I ain't here to hurt you." His knife came out with a whisper of steel, and he cut her bindings as gently as he could. She gasped as her hands came free, then slumped forward. "Who did this?" Clint asked. "The man up front." She nodded weakly. He's not just selling guns," she whispered. "He sells women. Smuggles them. Some he kills." Her voice cracked under the weight of horror. Clint's face hardened, deep lines cut into stone. He glanced back toward the front of the store, where he now heard nothing. No humming, no footsteps, no clinking of tools. He helped her to her feet, supporting her weight with one arm, and led her out into the main shop area. The man was gone. The coffee cup still steamed on the counter, half full. The register drawer was wide open. No footsteps, no vehicle pulling away. It was as if the man had vanished into the air, but Clint knew better. He scanned the room again, shelves, racks, wall panels, looking for any sign of a hidden exit, a trapdoor, a loose board, anything that suggested an escape route. Finding none, he laid the woman on a long bench used for sighting rifles and covered her with a green army surplus blanket he pulled from a shelf. Then he locked the front door and flipped the closed sign around. If the bastard was still inside, Clint would find him. The woman winced as she moved. Clint crouched beside her and opened a first aid kit he'd found behind the counter. He dabbed antiseptic on her wounds, then dressed them with gauze and surgical tape. "You're lucky I came in today," he said. "You might have been dead by sundown." She smiled faintly through cracked lips, then whispered, "Why are you helping me?" Clint looked at her for a long moment. "Because I've seen what happens when nobody does." He stood and walked to the rifle case, unlocking it with a key he found in a drawer, and took the Winchester 1892 down from its perch. He checked the action, loaded 4 rounds from a loose box of .44-40 shells, and slung it over his shoulder. Then he checked every room in the building, moving slow, deliberate, corners first, weapon raised, but the place was empty. Back in the gear closet, he noticed something new, a trapdoor cleverly hidden beneath a false bottom in the supply crate the woman had been leaning against. It was padlocked, the metal glinting like a dare. He picked the lock with a paperclip and the edge of a .38 shell casing, then opened it. A ladder descended into blackness. He shined a flashlight down but saw nothing but dirt and darkness. "There's a tunnel," he said aloud. "Smuggler's tunnel." The woman nodded. "He uses it when law gets too close." Clint replaced the trapdoor and secured it. He couldn't chase ghosts, not yet. He needed to get her to safety. He helped her into the cab of his truck, then took one last look around the shop. He lit a match, dropped it into a bucket of oil-soaked rags near the desk, and walked out as flames began to crawl up the walls. No records, no denials, no chance for that place to harm anyone else. The woman sat bundled in the passenger's seat, silent, watching him as he climbed behind the wheel. "You never told me your name," she said. "I didn't," he replied, starting the engine. "Don't need one." "Not today." She nodded, then stared out at the desert as the sun began its slow dive into the mountains, and the fire behind them painted the sky with smoke. Clint drove toward the highway, the rifle across his lap and a promise burning behind his eyes. He would find the man who did this. He would end it. But for now, he would drive until she was safe, until she could breathe without fear. The past could wait. Retribution, like justice, needed the right moment. And Clint Eastwood always waited for the right moment. By the time Clint reached the highway, the sky was bleeding orange behind the mountains, and the woman beside him had drifted into a shallow, uneasy sleep. He didn't ask her name. Names had weight, and right now, survival was lighter without one. The Winchester rode across his lap, his boot jammed against the gas pedal, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror, not out of fear, but reflex, as if expecting the past to appear behind him in a plume of dust. He drove east through the night, across empty county roads where only coyotes called, stopping only once to siphon fuel from an abandoned service station. In the dawn's thin light, he pulled up behind a rundown roadside motel that rented rooms for cash and forgot faces before they faded from the doorframe. The woman stirred. "Where are we?" she murmured. "Safe enough for now," Clint replied, helping her into a room that smelled of bleach and old cigarettes. He bought first aid from a gas station across the road, bandages, peroxide, crackers, and coffee. She didn't speak for a long time after that, but when she did, it was with clarity. "His name's Kane Maddox," she said. "He told me once. Said his family owned the place for generations. That store wasn't his business. Just a lid." Clint didn't react, but the name rang like a bullet casing on tile. He'd heard it before. Maddox had done time under another name, back in the 90s, tied to arms deals and trafficking charges that vanished in court like smoke in the wind. "Where'd he take you from?" Clint asked. "Bar in Reno," she said. "Said he was hiring girls for a shooting range promotion. I woke up in that closet." Clint clenched his jaw. "He's not just selling women," he muttered. "He's moving them, disposing the ones who fight back." The woman flinched. He saw it and softened his voice. "You got a name?" She hesitated. "Lena," she said at last. Clint nodded. "Lena, I'm going to need your help. If he's run a ring this long, he's got help. Buyers, guards, people who know how to disappear." Lena looked him dead in the eye. "Then let's make them reappear." They started at a truck stop where Clint had once found a man hiding from the mob in the summer of '89. It hadn't changed much, still smelled like diesel and regret. The cook behind the counter recognized Maddox's photo the moment Clint flashed it. "Kane? Yeah, that son of a bitch comes through every few weeks. Buys burner phones, drinks hard, and leaves with the kind of girls don't make it to the news." "He ever mention a place to hole up?" Clint asked. The cook wiped his hands on a filthy apron and said, somewhere near Saguaro Ridge, south of the old oil fields. Abandoned ranger station, maybe. You didn't hear that from me. Clint tipped his hat and left a $100 bill on the counter. I never hear anything, the cook called after him. Back in the truck, Lena stared at the map. Saguaro Ridge's got miles of empty canyon, she said. You sure he's there? He's somewhere people don't want to look, Clint replied. Which makes it perfect. They drove through the edge of nowhere, where roads ended in bone-dry trails and the signs all had bullet holes. Along the way, Lena regained color and voice, asking about Clint's past, though he dodged most of her questions. He finally told her about a girl in Juarez, 1981. Her name was Rosa. He found her too late. Maddox's work had a signature even back then. You've been hunting him a long time, Lena said. Clint nodded. Didn't know it until yesterday. But now that I do, I finish it. Saguaro Ridge loomed like a broken crown of red rock and cactus, the air still and hot as a furnace. They parked the truck half a mile out, cloaked it with branches, and went to rest on foot. Clint moved with predator patience, every step silent, the Winchester ready in his hands. Lena followed close behind with a pistol he'd given her, small, worn but loaded. At the top of the ridge stood a half-collapsed building with boarded windows and a chimney blackened by decades of wind and time. Through binoculars, they saw movement. 2 men with AR-15s guarding a fence, pacing in lazy circles like they'd never seen real war. Clint planned fast. We wait for dark. You stay in the rocks. If I'm not back in 20, head back to the truck. Don't wait. Lena didn't argue. She'd seen enough of Maddox's world to know what loyalty looked like and when to run. Night fell like a dropped curtain, and Clint moved in shadows, flanking the guards with practiced menace. The first one went down with a bone-snapping chokehold. The second tried to raise his rifle, but caught a boot to the ribs and a fist across his jaw. Clint dragged both into the brush, tied and gagged them, and crept inside. The station's interior was worse than the shop. Mattresses stained with blood, chains on the walls, phones with labeled buyers and price lists. Clint took photos with Lena's burner, then found the main room. Kane Maddox seated at a table with maps and cash scattered across it, nursing a drink like it was communion wine. Didn't expect a ghost, Maddox said, not turning around. Thought they buried you in Panama. They tried, Clint said, stepping into the light, rifle raised. Maddox didn't move. You burned my shop. Took my merchandise. You want justice or revenge? Aren't they the same? Clint asked. Maddox stood slowly, revealing a hidden pistol beneath his coat. Depends who's holding the gun. Clint didn't hesitate. The rifle roared once, and Maddox dropped like a marionette with its strings cut. Clint turned just as Lena stepped inside, her face pale but firm. Is it done? She asked. Clint looked down at the man who had nearly disappeared her from the world. It started, he said. They gathered what evidence they could, files, names, videotapes, and torched the building before dawn. This time, Clint watched it burn from the ridge, not looking away until the last timber collapsed. They returned to the truck, and, as the sun rose, Lena said, You could have killed him years ago. I didn't know it was him, Clint said. Now I do. What happens now? She asked. Clint looked at the road ahead, endless and quiet. We find a next name on that list. Together? Lena asked. If you want, Clint replied. But there's no going back. Lena didn't hesitate. I'm not going back. They drove in silence for a long time, the horizon glowing gold in the distance, the fire behind them a dying echo. Clint Eastwood didn't speak of heroism or justice, but he knew what it meant to show up too late and what it meant to make sure no one else did. They didn't talk much on the road. Words had their limits, and both had already crossed too many lines that language couldn't undo. The list they took from Maddox's safe was handwritten and cruel. Cities, dates, and names, some crossed out, some circled, others annotated in a cipher only men like Maddox would understand. Clint decoded it slowly, recognizing call signs from old CIA field reports, black market initials, and location markers only someone who'd lived in the dirt for decades could recognize. Lena read the names aloud as they drove, each one dropping like a pebble in her throat. She asked Clint once why no one stopped men like Maddox sooner. Because sometimes, he answered, no one's willing to lose what it takes to end them. That silence stayed with her longer than any scream. Their first stop was a warehouse outside Las Cruces, a shipping depot registered to a dummy corporation and frequented by refrigerated trucks that never appeared on the books. They scouted it from a rooftop, watching as two more women were unloaded like furniture, bound and blindfolded. Lena's hands trembled on the scope, but her voice was steel. How do we take them? Clint laid out the plan like he was reciting scripture. Silent entry, smoke grenade, disable comms, isolate the leader, extract the girls. We do this right, he said, and no one fires a shot. But Clint Eastwood didn't believe in perfect endings. Things always got messy. They moved just before dawn, slipping through a loading bay door left ajar for early shipments. Clint moved with ghost-like precision, knocking out guards with the butt of his Winchester while Lena planted the small charges he'd taught her to set. The smoke grenades went off just as alarms began to buzz, cloaking them in white haze and confusion. Inside the chaos, Lena found the girls in a locked cage, just like she had been. She broke the latch with a crowbar and ushered them out. Clint, meanwhile, found the site foreman, a smirking man with gelled hair and a pinky ring. You know what you're doing is hell itself, Clint growled. I just moved product, the man replied. You moved the wrong one, Clint said, and broke his nose with one punch before zip-tying him to a forklift. They left him there, bleeding, screaming, and irrelevant. After that, word began to spread. The pipeline that Maddox had kept airtight started to unravel. The buyers stopped answering calls. The runners panicked. Men whose lives depended on silence suddenly started talking to anyone who'd listen, trying to trade names for leniency. Clint and Lena followed each thread. One led to a strip club in Tucson, where girls were branded with serial numbers and drugged before shipment. Another led to a fake rehab center in Amarillo, a place that billed parents for treatment and sold the unclaimed. In each place, they left evidence, burning files, anonymous tips, and enough photos to make the press salivate. But Clint never stayed to talk. He and Lena moved like a storm, never lingering, never retreating. Justice, Lena said one night around a dying campfire, feels too soft a word. Clint stared into the flames. It is. Justice is what the law gives you. This is something else. But as they moved forward, the cost began to surface. Clint's truck was tailed outside Flagstaff. Two men in a black SUV tried to ram them off the road. Clint sent them crashing into a ravine and torched the vehicle before police could ask questions. That night, Lena found him sitting alone with his rifle across his knees, staring into the dark. You okay? She asked. You ever feel like the more evil you wipe out, the more it stains your own hands? He said. Every day, Lena replied. But I'd rather bleed, trying than sit clean while it grows. Clint looked at her then, really looked, and saw not a victim, but a warrior forged in fire. They made their way to Kansas next, Prairie Hollow, a sleepy little town with a hidden nightmare. An old cannery outside city limits was the final address on the list, and Lena knew from Maddox records that it was the central node for distribution. Files moved in, bodies moved out. They arrived at nightfall, but the building was fully lit, as if the operation had known they were coming. It's a trap, Clint said flatly. So we spring it, Lena replied. Inside were half a dozen men with automatic weapons, bulletproof vests, and radios clipped to their belts. At the center of it all was a man named Vance O'Hara, former intelligence, now freelance evil, who once sold body armor to both sides in Afghanistan. Clint Eastwood, he said with a smirk, walking out onto the loading dock. Last of the relics. Thought you died in Beirut. Beirut was cleaner than this place, Clint replied. The firefight was inevitable. Clint went in from the side, Lena from the catwalk. Bullets carved through metal and brick, sparks dancing off steel crates as men yelled and ducked. Clint dropped two with precise shots from the Winchester before switching to a sidearm. Lena laid down cover fire, moving fast, smart, unrelenting. It ended in 6 minutes. 4 men dead, 2 wounded. Vance O'Hara, coughing blood, hand clutched around a belly wound, trying to crawl away. Clint stood over him. You had choices, he said. You made the worst ones. So did you? O'Hara spat. "You're just wearing cleaner boots." Clint didn't reply. He walked away as Lena called the feds with the tip and coordinates. By the time they left, sirens were painting the sky red and blue. They crossed into Colorado with cash, silence, and 6 empty seats in the truck that used to belong to traffickers. Lena slept more now, deeper, not because she was at peace, but because her body finally believed it could rest. Clint drove like a man with no end in sight, because maybe there wasn't one. They stayed one night in a cabin overlooking a lake. Clint cooked beans over a fire and stared at the water. "You ever going to stop?" Lena asked. "Probably not," he said. "I've still got names in my head." She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded paper, the last page from Maddox's file. "This one," she said, pointing to the bottom. "He was at the bar in Reno the night I disappeared." Clint read the name, a silence blooming behind his eyes. "He was in Juarez, too," Clint whispered. "I remember that name." The sun rose the next morning over calm water and broken people piecing themselves back together. Lena packed a rifle this time, cleaned and ready. "You could leave any time," Clint told her. "Walk away." "So could you," she said. "But here we are." They didn't need to say more. The road stretched ahead again, quiet, long, and waiting. And somewhere down that road was one last reckoning, and they'd be ready for it.